Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're zeroing in on a truly pivotal moment, a single day back in 490 BCE that you could argue really set the course for Western history. We're talking about the Battle of Marathon.
Absolutely. And our goal today isn't just to recount the battle, it's to really unpack how this victory, this Athenian victory, became such a profound turning point.
Yeah, we want to go beyond just a summary.
Exactly. We're looking at the commanders, the battlefield itself, the tactics, some really innovative tactics, actually, and then the ripple effects, both immediate and long-term, how it shaped Greek politics, their military identity, even the path of democracy.
We'll definitely spend some time on the Greek commanders' tactical choices, which were pretty bold. And that clash of military styles between Persia and the Greeks, it's fascinating.
It really is a clash of philosophies almost.
And then we'll look at the aftermath, how it boosted Athens' standing. So for you listening, this is your essential guide to understanding a foundational moment, a story of civic bets and military ingenuity.
Okay, so to really get why this fight happened at Marathon, we need to step back a bit and look at the bigger picture. The conflict between the huge Persian Empire and these, well, comparatively tiny Greek city-states.
This wasn't just some minor dispute, was it?
Not at all. This was a major geopolitical collision course. Tensions had been simmering for a while, but the trigger, the thing that really kicked it off, was the Ionian Revolt around 499 BCE.
Right, the Greek cities on the coast of what's now Turkey trying to break free from Persian rule.
Exactly. And crucially, Athens and another city, Eretria, sent ships and troops to help the rebels. This involvement led to the burning of Sardis, a major Persian regional capital.
Which, for the Persian king Darius I, was more than just a military setback.
Oh, much more. It was a massive insult, a personal humiliation and an affront to the empire's authority. So his motivation becomes pretty clear. First, punishment, specifically targeting Athens and Eretria for their role.
Makes sense. Payback.
Payback, definitely, but also strategic. Darius needed to secure his western frontier. These independent, troublesome Greek cities were a source of instability he wanted to eliminate.
So it was about making an example of them too, send a message.
Precisely. This leads to what we call the punitive expedition. It wasn't meant to be a long campaign of conquest initially, more like a swift, brutal surgical strike.
Designed to terrify others into submission.
You got it. The Persian fleet and army moved systematically down the Aegean Sea, and just before Marathon, they delivered that terrifying message by capturing and utterly destroying Eretria.
A clear warning. This is what happens if you resist.
Horrifyingly clear. And then the Persian force, led by their generals Datis and Artaphernes, sailed across the channel and landed on the coast of Attica, on the plain of Marathon.
Okay, so the Persians are literally on Athenian soil, just about 26 miles from the city itself. The sense of crisis in Athens must have been immense.
Unimaginable pressure. Athens mobilized its entire citizen army, the hoplites, immediately. And they sent out desperate pleas for help to their allies, most importantly to Sparta.
But Sparta didn't show up in time, did they?
No. And this highlights a key point about ancient Greece. That idea of pan-Hellenic unity was often more theory than practice. Sparta did promise help. They were the dominant land power after all.
Right.
But their hands were tied by religious law. They were in the middle of a major religious festival, the Carnea, during which military expeditions were forbidden. Plus, Marathon was a long march away, so they promised to come, but only after the festival ended.
Which left Athens dangerously exposed. Time was running out.
It really was. They were facing this enormous imperial army essentially alone.
Which makes the help they did get even more significant.
Absolutely vital.
Yeah.
The Plataeans, from a smaller city in Boeotia that had an alliance with Athens, sent their entire fighting force, maybe about 1,000 men.
Not a huge number compared to the Persians, perhaps, but symbolically massive.
Immensely important for morale. It meant Athens wasn't completely isolated. So the Greek force standing there at Marathon was roughly 10,000 Athenians, plus those 1,000 crucial Plataeans, maybe 11,000 in total.
Facing. Well, let's talk about the Persian force commanded by Datis and Artaphernes. What were they like?
They represented the standard, very effective Achaemenid imperial army, diverse, drawing troops from across the vast empire. Their strength wasn't in heavy infantry like the Greeks, but in flexibility and ranged combat.
So lots of archers.
Lots of archers, yes. Highly skilled archers like the Medes and Saka, also javelin throwers, other types of lightly armed infantry, and critically very effective cavalry. Their whole approach was based on mobility, missile fire to break up enemy formations, and then using cavalry to exploit gaps or pursue.
And they arrive by sea, giving them that strategic mobility, too.
Exactly. The fleet was key not just for transport, but for potential flanking moves or redeployments along the coast. They were specialists in combined arms, using infantry, archers, cavalry, and naval power together.
Okay, so let's contrast the leadership and the forces themselves. On the Greek side, command was technically shared, wasn't it? 10 generals, plus the pole march, the overall commander.
Yes, a formal structure involved 10 strategoi elected from the 10 tribes, plus the pole march, who on that day was Callimachus. Command rotated daily. But most sources agree that the driving force behind the winning strategy was one general in particular, Miltiades.
What made him so important?
Experience. Miltiades wasn't just any Athenian general. He'd actually spent years ruling a territory, the Chersonese, which bordered the Persian sphere. He'd even served with the Persians on campaign earlier in his career.
So he knew them. He knew how they fought.
He understood their strengths, yes, but maybe more importantly, he understood their potential weaknesses, their reliance on archers, how their cavalry operated. This first-hand knowledge was invaluable. He was the perfect person to devise a counter-strategy.
And the soldiers he commanded. The Athenian and Plataean hoplites. Describe them for us.
The hoplite is the iconic soldier of classical Greece. Think heavy infantry, heavily armed, heavily armored. They wore a bronze helmet, a cuirass or breastplate, greaves on their shins, and carried that large, distinctive round shield, the aspis or hoplon.
Where the name hoplite comes from.
Precisely. Their main weapon was a long, heavy thrusting spear, the dory, maybe 8 or 9 feet long, and they carried a short sword for close-in fighting if the spear broke.
And these weren't professional soldiers in the modern sense.
No, that's a crucial distinction. They were citizens. Farmers, potters, merchants, landowners. They typically had to provide their own extensive equipment, the panoply. They were fighting not for pay, but for their city, their land, their political rights, their families.
That citizen soldier versus imperial levy distinction feels really important here.
It's fundamental. Their fighting style reflected this. They fought shoulder to shoulder in a dense formation called the phalanx, usually 8 ranks deep, sometimes more.
The shield wall.
Exactly. The shield in your left hand protected your right side and the left side of the man next to you. It created this solid wall of shields and spears. Discipline, cohesion, and staying power were everything. It was built for shock action, for pushing forward relentlessly in close combat.
A real grinding physical fight.
Absolutely. The optismos, the pushing, was often how battles between phalanxes were decided. It wasn't about individual duels so much as the collective weight and discipline of the formation.
Okay, contrasting that with the Persians you described, lighter armor, focus on missiles, cavalry.
Right. The Persian infantry often had wicker shields, maybe some scale armor, but generally lighter protection than the hoplites. They relied on softening up the enemy with arrows and javelins before closing. Their elite infantry, like the Immortals, though whether the full contingent was at Marathon is debated, certainly some elite Persian and Median troops were formidable, but still generally equipped for a more mobile style of fighting.
And the cavalry was key to their doctrine.
Absolutely key. Fast, skilled horsemen, many of them horse archers. They could harass flanks, disrupt formations, pursue fleeing enemies. A major threat if they could operate freely.
Which brings us to the question of numbers. Herodotus gives these massive figures for the Persians, over 100,000 sometimes. Modern historians doubt that, right?
Yeah, those huge numbers are almost certainly an exaggeration, likely meant to magnify the glory of the Greek victory. Think about the logistics supplying and transporting 100,000 or 200,000 men across the Aegean in 490 BCE with the ships they had. Extremely difficult, bordering on impossible for a short punitive expedition.
So what are more realistic estimates?
Modern estimates vary, but generally place the Persian force somewhere in the range of, say, 25,000 to maybe 30,000 troops, including infantry, cavalry, and support personnel. Some argue for even fewer.
Still significantly outnumbering the Greeks, though.
Oh, definitely. Even at the lower estimates, the Persians likely outnumber the 11,000 or so Greeks by at least 2 to 1, possibly 3 to 1.
But the key takeaway isn't just the raw numbers.
Exactly. It's the composition. Quality versus quantity, or rather different types of quality. The Greeks had fewer men, but those men were heavy shock infantry, perfectly suited for a head-on clash. The Persians had more men with excellent range capability in cavalry, designed for a more fluid battle.
The Greek advantage was concentrated in that close quarters fight.
If, and it's a big if, they could force the Persians into that kind of fight, If they could close the distance before the archers inflicted too many casualties, and if they could somehow neutralize the cavalry threat.
Which leads us directly to the battlefield itself. Marathon. The terrain played a huge role, didn't it?
It was arguably the Greeks' most important, if hidden, ally. Marathon is this crescent-shaped coastal plain. It's fairly flat right by the sea, but it's hemmed in.
Hemmed in by what?
By hills, inland the foothills of Mount Pentelicus, and by marshes on either end, especially the Great Marsh to the north. These geographical features acted like natural barriers.
So it narrowed the usable battlefield space.
Precisely. It compressed the area where large formations could effectively maneuver. This immediately limited the Persians' ability to use their superior numbers for a wide flanking attack. The hills naturally protected the Greek flanks to some extent.
And the marshes and maybe softer ground, bad for cavalry.
Very bad for heavy cavalry operations. It restricted where the Persian horsemen could charge effectively. They needed open, firm ground. And Marathon, especially near the edges, didn't offer that everywhere.
So Miltiades and the Greeks didn't just happen to fight there. They chased their ground carefully.
Absolutely. They seem to have camped in the foothills for several days, observing the Persians who had landed on the plain. They refused to be drawn down into the open, flat ground where the Persian cavalry would have been most dangerous. They used the landscape deliberately.
Positioning their line to maximize that natural protection.
Right. Miltiades extended the Greek battle line, probably making it thinner than usual in places, specifically to match the likely frontage of the Persian line and prevent being easily outflanked, even with the terrain helping them.
Okay, and then comes the really audacious part. Miltiades' big tactical gamble. He messed with the standard phalanx formation.
He did something revolutionary, really. He intentionally weakened the center of his own battle line. The sources suggest he thinned the ranks in the middle down to maybe only 4 deep instead of the usual 8 or more.
That sounds completely crazy. Why create a weak spot right in the center where the Persians would likely put their best troops and push hardest?
It was an incredibly calculated risk. A high-stakes gamble based on his understanding of both Greek and Persian strengths. He wasn't just creating a weak spot, he was creating bait.
Bait.
Yes. While thinning the center, he simultaneously packed troops onto the wings of the Greek line, making them much deeper and stronger than normal. The idea was this. The deliberately weakened center would give way. It was expected to bend, maybe even break locally.
Drawing the Persians forward into a trap.
Exactly. Lure the best Persian infantry, who were traditionally placed in the center of their line, forward into what looked like a breakthrough. Make them commit.
While the super strong Greek wings held firm on the flanks.
And then some. The plan relied on the heavy hoplites on those reinforced wings to crush the weaker Persian troops opposite them on the flanks, and then, once they'd achieved local victory, to wheel inwards.
The pincer movement.
The classic envelopment. But it required incredible nerve and discipline, especially from the hoplites in the center, who had to give ground under heavy pressure without panicking and causing a total rout. It tells you something about their training and their motivation.
And timing was everything. Miltiades didn't just order the attack randomly.
No, he waited. The sources are a bit unclear on the exact details, but the consensus is that he launched the attack at a moment when the Persian cavalry was, for some reason, not immediately available to support the Persian infantry line.
Why might that be?
Several theories. Maybe they had been temporarily withdrawn to water the horses or sent foraging. Maybe some had even been re-embarked onto the ships, perhaps for a planned dash around the coast to attack Athens directly while the army pinned the Greeks at Marathon. Or maybe the terrain just made them slow to deploy. Whatever the reason, Miltiades saw an opportunity, a window where the Persian infantry line was vulnerable without its cavalry screen, and he seized it.
Okay, so the moment is right. The formation is set. The Greeks attack. And they don't just walk, they run.
They charged at a run, according to Herodotus, across maybe a mile of open ground between the two armies. This was crucial.
Why run? That must have been exhausting in full armor.
Extremely exhausting, but tactically vital. The goal was to cross that killing zone as quickly as possible, to minimize the time they were exposed to the deadly volleys of the Persian archers. A slow, steady advance would have been suicidal. They needed to close the distance fast and force the battle into hand-to-hand combat, where their heavy armor and spears gave them the advantage.
Imagine the psychological impact of that charging wall of bronze and spears on the Persians.
It must have been terrifying.
Yeah.
Unexpected. Hoplites usually advanced at a walk or maybe a steady trot. A full run over that distance was extraordinary.
Okay, the charge hits home. What happens next? Let's follow Miltiades' plan.
It unfolds almost exactly as he'd envisioned, remarkably.
Ah,
The powerful Greek wings, where he'd concentrated his strength, smashed into the corresponding Persian flanks. And because they were deeper and heavier, they almost immediately started pushing the Persians back on both sides.
but in the center.
In the center, as planned, the thinner Greek line buckled under the pressure of the elite Persian and Saka infantry pushing forward. They gave ground, they bent backwards.
Which, to the Persians in the center, must have looked like victory.
Absolutely. They saw the Greek center receding, they pushed harder, pouring into the apparent gap, likely shouting victory cries. They thought the Greek line was breaking. This was the critical moment of Persian miscalculation. They'd achieved a local breakthrough, yes, but they were rushing headlong into the jaws of the trap.
Their forward momentum exposed their own flanks.
Completely exposed them. Because while the Persian center surged forward, the Greek wings, having routed the forces opposite them, didn't just chase them off the field.
They turned inward.
They executed that planned maneuver. They wheeled inwards, hitting the now exposed flanks of the advanced Persian center. It was a perfectly executed double envelopment.
Caught in the crossfire. Or rather, cross-spear.
Exactly. The Persian center troops suddenly found themselves attacked not just from the front by the yielding Greek center, but also crushed from both sides by the heavy hoplites of the victorious Greek wings. They were packed in, unable to use their bows effectively, their lighter armor, no match for the Greek spears.
That must have turned into chaos very quickly for the Persians.
Total chaos. Cohesion evaporated. Their formation dissolved. Remember, the terrain is still boxing them in hills and marshes on the sides, the sea behind them, and critically, no effective cavalry support to intervene or cover a retreat.
So the breakthrough turned into a complete rout.
A catastrophic rout. The Persian center, and soon the entire army, broke and fled in disorder back towards their ships anchored off the beach.
But the Greeks didn't just let them go.
No, the battle wasn't over. Fueled by victory, the hoplites pursued them relentlessly right down to the shoreline. There was brutal fighting on the beach as the Persians desperately tried to scramble aboard their ships.
Herodotus mentions the Greeks capturing some ships.
Yes, he says they managed to capture 7 ships in the fighting on the beach before the rest of the fleet could pull away and escape. The remaining Persian forces withdrew across the Aegean. It was an utterly decisive victory for Athens and Plataea.
Let's talk about the cost, the casualties. The numbers reported are incredibly lopsided.
Astonishingly so. Herodotus famously claims only 192 Athenians died, plus a small number of Plataeans. He puts Persian losses at around 6,400.
Now, we always take ancient numbers with a grain of salt, but
Yeah. But the disparity is consistently reported and generally accepted by historians. Even if the exact figures are off, Greek losses were remarkably light for such a major engagement, while Persian casualties were devastatingly heavy for the expeditionary force. It underlines just how effective the hoplites were once they closed and how brutal the pursuit was.
what was the immediate strategic impact of this?
Huge. It completely stopped Darius's punitive expedition in its tracks. His immediate goal of punishing Athens was thwarted. The threat to Athens was lifted, for now.
It bought them time.
Crucial time, about 10 years as it turned out. It gave Athens and other Greek states a vital breathing space to prepare, politically and militarily, for the inevitable next round, because everyone knew the Persians wouldn't just forget this.
And politically, back in Greece, what did Marathon mean for Athens' relationship with, say, Sparta?
That's fascinating. The Spartans did eventually arrive a couple of days after the battle. They marched to Marathon, surveyed the aftermath, congratulated the Athenians, and marched home.
A bit awkward.
Politically significant, though. It highlighted the limitations of Spartan power projection and the constraints of their rigid system. It showed they couldn't always be relied upon for rapid intervention, even against a common enemy.
Which must have boosted Athens' standing enormously.
Immensely.
Mm-hmm.
Athens had faced the Persian juggernaut largely on its own, with only Plataea beside them, and won a stunning victory. Their prestige, their confidence, their reputation soared, both at home and across the Greek world. It was a defining moment for Athenian identity.
This victory must have fundamentally changed how the Greeks saw themselves and how they saw the Persians.
Absolutely. Before Marathon, there was this aura of invincibility around the Persian Empire. They conquered so much, so easily. Marathon shattered that myth.
Proof positive that the Persians could be beaten.
Yes, and beaten by citizen soldiers defending their homeland. That psychological impact can't be overstated. It fueled Athenian confidence and ambition, directly contributing to their rise as a leading power in Greece over the next 50 years.
And you mentioned earlier, this links directly to the survival and development of Athenian democracy.
Critically so. If Athens had lost, it likely would have become just another province, a satrapy, within the Persian Empire. Their unique experiment in democracy would have been crushed in its infancy.
So the victory preserved the political space for democracy to grow.
Exactly. And more than that, the victory, won primarily by the hoplite class, those citizen soldiers arguably strengthened their political leverage within Athens. Military success and civic rights became even more closely intertwined, pushing the democratic development forward.
It allowed Athens to keep building its own power, particularly its naval power, didn't it?
Yes, instead of being absorbed, Athens could continue its trajectory. This victory created the conditions for the later flourishing of Athenian culture, the great playwrights like Sophocles, philosophers like Socrates, statesmen like Pericles. None of that might have happened, or happened in the same way, without Marathon.
And it set the stage for the next, even bigger conflict with Persia.
It did. Marathon wasn't the end of the Persian threat, just a pause. But it was a vital pause. It allowed Athens, crucially, under the guidance of the politician Themistocles, to make a hugely important strategic decision.
The fleet?
The fleet. Themistocles argued successfully that the future defense against Persia lay at sea. He persuaded the Athenians to use a windfall from their silver mines at Laurium, not for a public handout, but to build a massive fleet of triremes, state-of-the-art warships.
A decision made possible by the breathing room Marathon provided.
And a decision that would prove absolutely decisive 10 years later at the Battle of Salamis, during Xerxes' invasion. Without Marathon, there might not have been the confidence, the time, or perhaps even the political will to build that fleet.
So the cultural legacy is immense, too. Marathon becomes more than just a battle.
It instantly became a legend, a symbol, not just of military prowess, but of civic virtue, of free citizens resisting tyranny, defending their homes. That narrative was incredibly powerful and shaped Athenian identity for generations.
And it echoes even today with the marathon race.
Exactly. That story, likely embellished over time, of the messenger Phidippides running the 26 miles from Marathon to Athens, gasping out Nike, victory, and then dying, is the origin myth for the modern marathon race. It shows how deeply this event lodged itself in collective memory.
They even buried the Athenian dead on the battlefield itself, didn't they? Which is unusual.
Highly unusual, a special honor. The Soros, the burial mound for the 192 Athenian fallen, is still there at Marathon. It became a site of pilgrimage, a physical monument to the victory, inspiring poems, songs, civic cults. It cemented the narrative. Freedom versus empire, democracy versus despotism.
It really stands as this perfect case study, doesn't it? Geography, tactics, morale, leadership, all coming together with huge political consequences.
It's a masterclass in how those elements interact. It wasn't just about the hoplites being tough. It was Miltiades' genius in understanding his enemy, using the terrain, taking that calculated tactical risk, and his soldiers having the discipline and courage to execute it.
Okay, let's try and distill the key takeaways from our deep dive today. First, the Athenian and Plataean hoplites brilliantly used the restrictive terrain at Marathon to negate the Persians' advantages in numbers and cavalry.
Absolutely. Second, Miltiades' innovative tactic, weakening the center, strengthening the wings, was a high-risk, high-reward gamble that proved decisive, leading to that classic pincer movement and rout.
And the result? The immediate preservation of Athenian independence, which was critical for the continued development of Athenian democracy and culture. Plus, it bought that vital decade to prepare for Xerxes, especially building the fleet.
And that legacy echoes down through history. Marathon remains this powerful symbol of civic resilience, of what a citizen army can achieve when fighting for its freedom.
Right. It really does make you think about the what-ifs. We've talked about how Marathon allowed Athens to survive, build its fleet, continue its democratic experiment, and ultimately play a key role in repelling Xerxes' invasion 10 years later.
A crucial decade.
So here's a final thought for you to consider. How different might our world look today if that single battle on that single day had gone the other way? If Athens had fallen in 490 BCE, what power vacuum would that have created? Could Athenian democracy have been extinguished before it truly took root? What might the trajectory of Western political thought, philosophy, and culture have been without that Athenian victory? It really underscores how much can hinge on one battle fought by ordinary citizens defending their homes.